Welcome back! Today we're continuing our discussion of Beowulf, and we'll be looking at lines 195 through 702. This is the portion of the story where we finally get to meet our hero Beowulf, and we also get a closer look at many of the main characters of this story. So for this episode, we're going to focus primarily on characterization. In line 195, we're introduced to a character who is only called Hygelac Thane. Now, Hygelac is the king of the Geats, and we will get to know more about them as we go forward. But this hero, this unnamed hero, hears of the plight of Hrothgar and the Danes, and he decides to go challenge Grendel. He announced his plan to sail the Swan's Road and search out that king, the famous prince who needed defenders. Nobody tried to keep him from going. No elder denied him, dear as he was to them. Instead, they inspected omens and spurred his ambition to go, whilst he moved about like the leader he was, enlisting men, the best he could find. With 14 others, the warrior boarded the boat as captain, a canny pilot along coast and currents. And so this young man is told, go get him, go try it out. And so he and his band of Geats, they go over across the water to meet with the Danes. They arrive, they land, they shake out their mail, they prepare themselves, and they thank God for their safe crossing. At that point, we get introduced to another character, the Coast Guard, or the Sea Watchman. And what's going to happen over the next few pages of this book is that our hero, who is as yet unnamed, but who we are beginning to suspect is the title character of the book, is going to get introduced to a series of characters as sort of checks as he gets closer and closer to King Hrothgar. And each of these challenges will give him an opportunity to show something about himself. When we talk about characterization, we learn about characters through their actions, through their words, and through other people's words about them. Each of these challenges gives our hero a chance to show himself. So first, the Coast Guard Sea Watchman rides up and challenges them and says, "Who are you all landing on my shore? What kind of men are you who arrive rigged out for combat in coats of mail, sailing here over the sea lanes in your steep-hulled boat? I have been stationed as a lookout on this coast for a long time. My job is to watch the waves for raiders, any danger to the Danish shore. Never before has such a force under arms disembarked so openly, not bothering to ask if the centuries allowed them safe passage, or the clan had consented. Nor have I seen a mightier man-at-arms on this earth than the one standing here. Unless I am mistaken, he is truly noble." So there's a little bit of a threat here, saying, how dare you just disembark openly like this on our shore without any kind of leave? But also, in the moment that he's challenging them, he looks at the hero and he says, wow, this guy is something. I've not seen someone like him before. This is no mere hanger-on in a hero's armor. So now, before you fare inland as interlopers, I have to be informed about who you are and where you hail from. Outsiders from across the water, say it again. The sooner you tell me where you come from and why, the better. Chickering, in his comments on this passage, makes a note about the almost comic bumbling of the Coast Guard here. He's definitely trying to threaten them and make sure that they get into line and state their business, but he's also clearly in great admiration for the hero he sees stepping towards him. This isn't just any old fighter. This is clearly someone who's made of something. And so the hero steps forward and says, well, we're the Geats. We hail from King Hygelac. And he announces his father's name, but he still hasn't named himself. And he says that what he's heard about Grendel and how he's here to offer his help to the tormented Danes. We have arrived here on a great errand to the Lord of the Danes, and I believe, therefore, there should be nothing hidden or withheld between us. So the hero does seem like he expects the Coast Guard to readily accept what they say and agree to lead them in. And in fact, he does. The Coast Guard is clearly impressed with them. And he says a funny thing. Anyone with gumption and a sharp mind will take the measure of two things, what's said and what's done. Now, is he talking about what the hero is saying? That the hero will say big words about fighting the monster and then actually carry out the deed? Or is he talking about himself? Because the very next thing he does is talk about what he's going to do for them. He's going to lead them in, he's going to make sure that their boats are taken care of. In fact, he goes out of his way to be helpful to them. May one so valiant and venturesome come unharmed through the clash of battle. He's clearly rooting for them by the time they finish talking. And so up stride these brightly shining heroes, stepping forward with, of course, their leader as the most heroic of all. Described as, "There was no one else like him alive. In his day, he was the mightiest man on earth, high-born and powerful. This guy is something else." And so the heroes, as they stride forward, they have these boar-crested helms with the image of a boar on their helmets. And that symbolizes protection. There's been a lot written about the symbolism in their armor. The Coast Guard leads them up to the castle and says, "Here you are, now I'm going to head back to the sea and keep watch." And so they arrive and they meet the second checkpoint. This is Wulfgar, who is a noble, and he is the one who is at the door to check them before they come in to Heorot. And he's also of nobility enough that he's going to be able to present them before Hrothgar. He also questions them and asks who they are and where they come from. "Stoutness of heart, bravery not banishment must have brought you to Hrothgar." So you can tell that they aren't just a bunch of outcasts and banished knights. These are men who are coming purposefully to meet with Hrothgar. Our hero steps up again and it says, "The man whose name was known for courage, the Geat leader, resolute in his helmet, answered in return, 'We are retainers from Higelac band. Beowulf is my name.'" We finally get his name. He finally announces himself to the herald who's going to announce him before Hrothgar. But notice how much build-up we had before we even got his name. His name is known for courage. "If your lord and master, the most renowned son of Halfdane, will hear me out and graciously allow me to greet him in person, I am ready and willing to report my errand." The confidence of our hero as he approaches the throne is very clear. Everyone is impressed with him. We get each of these century characters between are clearly impressed and taken aback by the bravery and the appearance of Beowulf. We're establishing his character before we even get him before Hrothgar. But also we see the confidence of Beowulf and yet his graciousness as he responds to each of these people. Wulfgar goes and announces them before Hrothgar. Listen to the way that Wulfgar describes Beowulf. "They call the chief in charge of their band by the name of Beowulf. They beg, my lord, an audience with you, exchange for words and formal greeting. Most gracious Hrothgar, do not refuse them, but grant them a reply. From their arms and appointment, they appear well-born and worthy of respect, especially the one who has led them this far. He is formidable indeed." So Wulfgar is ready to vouch for them as well. Hrothgar then, in greeting Beowulf, instead of directly talking about Beowulf, begins to talk about Beowulf's father. Now this is interesting because Beowulf is clearly a legendary figure. He's not a historical figure like Hrothgar is. And yet he's been established in this kind of time and context. He's been given a family, even though he is a character out of legend. His father, Ecgtheow, is also a fictional character. And we get a little bit of interesting backstory about Beowulf's father. So Hrothgar knows Ecgtheow. He has a little bit of history with him. And he's heard indirectly about Beowulf, and that Beowulf has the strength of 30 men in his grip. Now holy God has, in his goodness, guided him here to the West Danes to defend us from Grendel. This is my hope, and for his heroism I will recompense him with rich treasure. Go immediately, bid him and the Geats that he has in attendance to assemble and enter. Say moreover, when you speak to them, they are welcome in Denmark." And so Wulfgar calls them in. They have to leave their weapons and shields at the door, but they can come in their armor and present themselves before the king. It describes the shine of their armor as Beowulf is standing before the king. And Beowulf says, "Greetings to Hrothgar. I am Higelac's kinsman, one of his own hall troop. When I was younger, I had great triumphs. The news of Grendel, hard to ignore, reached me at home. Sailors brought stories of the plight you suffer in this legendary hall, how it lies deserted, empty and useless once the evening light hides itself under heaven's dome. So every elder and experienced councilman among my people supported my resolve to come to you, King Hrothgar, because all knew of my awesome strength. They had seen me boltered in the blood of enemies when I battled and bound 5 beasts, raided a troll nest, and in the night sea slaughtered sea brutes. I have suffered extremes and avenged the Geats. Their enemies brought it upon themselves. I devastated them. And now I mean to be a match for Grendel, and to settle the outcome in single combat. And so, my request, O King of Bright Danes, dear Prince of the Shieldings, friend of the people and the ring of defense, my one request is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege and purifying Heorot, with my own men to help me and nobody else. I have heard, moreover, that the monster scorns in his reckless way to use weapons. Therefore, to heighten Higelac's fame and gladden his heart, I hereby renounce sword and the shelter of a broad shield. The heavy warboard, hand to hand, is how it will be. A life and death fight with the fiend. Whichever one death fells must deem it just judgment by God. If Grendel wins, it will be a gruesome day. He will glut himself on the geats in the war hall, swoop without fear on that flower of manhood as on others before. Then my face won't be there to be covered in death. He will carry me away as he goes to ground, gorged and bloodied. He will run gloating with my raw corpse and feed on it alone in a cruel frenzy, fouling his moor nest. No need then to lament for long or lay out my body. If the battle takes me, send back this breast webbing that Wayland fashioned and Hrethel gave to me to Lord Higelac. Fate goes ever as fate must. Okay, so he states his history and what he plans to do. I'm going to fight Grendel. And not only am I going to fight Grendel, I don't want any of your help fighting Grendel. I'm going to fight him, just me and my men. And not only that, but you know what? I've heard that Grendel doesn't use weapons, so it doesn't seem fair for me to use weapons either. I'm going to fight him with my bare hands. And all of this sounds kind of pretentious, maybe? You might sound, that sounds like cocky. That sounds like a big boast. And it is a boast. Maybe a formal boast, though. But look what he does next. He says, whichever one death fells must deem it just judgment by God. He gives credit to the win, whichever side wins, to God. God has a judgment on the loser. If it just so happens that Grendel wins, and then he goes into this gory description of how Grendel will devour him, and he also, with almost a wry comic irony, he says, well, you know, if Grendel wins, well, I guess you don't have to pay for my funeral expenses because there won't be anything left of me to bury. But at least, you know, give this one special piece of my armor back to my lord to remember me by. Is Beowulf cocky? Well, he does recognize that fate is in control, weird, and also the Lord is in control, providence. And although he has courage and incredible strength, really, ultimately, those two forces are going to be what decides the day. Fate goes ever as fate must. And then Hrothgar begins to speak and gives his greeting. And his greeting is interesting. He starts by saying, Beowulf, you've come here to help us. But... And then he goes into his history with Ecgtheow, Beowulf's father. And he says, there was a feud one time, begun by your father. With his own hands he had killed Hitholaf, who was a wolfling. So war was looming, and his people, in fear of it, forced him to leave. He came away then, over rolling waves, to South Danesir, the Sons of Honor. I was then in the first flush of kingship, establishing my sway over all the rich strongholds of this heroic land. Hrothgar, my older brother and better man, also a son of Halfdanes, had died. Finally, I healed the feud by paying. I shipped a treasure trove to the Wolfings, and Ecgtheow acknowledged me with oaths of allegiance. So we find out that Hrothgar's past with Ecgtheow involved him protecting Ecgtheow, doing him a very good turn. All the blood feuds that show up over and over and over again in this book that are part of the culture, Ecgtheow killed a man, and it led to a blood feud between tribes, and so Ecgtheow's own people booted him out. But Hrothgar took him in and then paid the blood price for him, the weirgilt. And in a way, that gives Hrothgar the opportunity to accept Beowulf's offer of help, because one good turn deserves another. I did your father a good turn, and now you can do me a good turn. This is slightly different from the first two greetings that Beowulf got as he arrived in Denmark. The Coast Guard, Wulfgar, both of them were pretty effusive about Beowulf's awesomeness. Hrothgar is biding his time. It bothers me to have to burden anyone with all the grief Grendel has caused and the havoc he has wreaked upon us in Heorot, our humiliations. My household guard are on the wane. Fate sweeps them away into Grendel's clutches. But God can easily halt these raids and harrowing attacks. He then describes the many times in the past that somebody in the midst of drunkenness has been like, I'll fight that monster, and then the next morning there's like some blood splatter and nothing left. And so Hrothgar is maybe not trying to be overly enthusiastic at this moment, but he also accepts Beowulf's offer for help, but mostly because he has already done Beowulf's family a good turn. Now it's time to turn things around. But now that Beowulf has been welcomed in and has been chosen as the hero to fight the monster, we have a couple more important encounters. The next one is from the character Unferth. Unferth is a fascinating character because he strikes a discordant note at this point. He's the fly in the ointment. Where everyone else has been very accepting of Beowulf, Unferth is a little bit put off. From where he crouched at the king's feet, Unferth, a son of Eglaf, spoke contrary words. Beowulf's coming, his sea-braving, made him sick with envy. He could not brook or abide the fact that anyone else alive under heaven might enjoy greater regard than he did. And we'll get to his conversation with Beowulf in just a moment, but let's comment upon him structurally. Tolkien sees Unferth as a special figure that fills a certain role in this story. And he says that the audience would have expected a figure like this. Tolkien goes so far as to call him the Worm Tongue, a counselor with a bitter, potentially dangerous counsel. There are some links between him and some potential future treachery in Hrothgar's nephew as well in this story, which we'll talk about in a moment. And if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, you might see how Tolkien used this kind of character in his own story, with a character he literally named Wormtongue. But maybe Unferth isn't as bad as all that either. There are some potential redemptions for him later in the story. In any case, he's going to perform a particular trade-off with Beowulf, which is called a flighting. Beowulf has already made a boast. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to kill Grendel, and I'm going to do it barehanded. And Unferth challenges that boast with an insulting story about Beowulf, causing Beowulf to turn around and counter with another boast and insult. This boasting and insulting match offers Beowulf a formal place to show off in an appropriate fashion. And although at first it might make us feel that maybe he's cocky or maybe he's prideful, after all, pride goes before a fall, we always hear. But we also see that his pride is really just confidence in his strength, and it's coupled with an acceptance of both providence and fate, the two truly powerful forces in the background here. He knows he could die at Grendel's hands, and he also knows that the outcome is ultimately in the Lord's hands. And he accepts that with almost a kind of cheerfulness. There's a kind of humor in his comments on the funeral expenses in the last speech, as we noted. But this formal contest of words back and forth between Beowulf and Unferth is a really fun exchange. In some ways, it's the Anglo-Saxon equivalent of a rap battle.
Rap battle, Unferth versus Beowulf.
So let's look at what they say and unpack it. Unferth begins with a story he's heard about Beowulf. Are you the Beowulf who took on Breca in a swimming match on the open sea, risking the water just to prove that you could win? It was sheer vanity that made you venture out on the main deep. And no matter who tried, friend or foe, to deflect the pair of you, neither would back down. The sea test obsessed you. You waded in, embracing water, taking its measure, mastering currents, riding on the swell. The ocean swayed, winter went wild in the waves, but you vied for 7 nights. And then he outswam you, came ashore the stronger contender. He was cast up safe and sound one morning among the Heathoremes, then made his way to where he belonged in Bronding country. Home again, sure of his ground, in strong room and bond. So Breca made good his boast upon you and was proved right. No matter, therefore, how you may have fared in every bout and battle until now, this time you'll be worsted. No one has ever outlasted an entire night against Grendel. Unferth's claims against Beowulf are leveled at the moment that he had a swimming match with Breca. And it was a swimming match that he lost. He had boasted that he could outswim Breca, and he failed. Unferth holds that as evidence, along with all the other failures of warriors against Grendel in the past, that Beowulf will also fail this boast and this match. You may have had some good fights in the past, but you're not going to take out Grendel. Notice he also pokes at Beowulf's overconfidence in his match with Breca. The way they chose this foolish contest and then couldn't be talked out of it because of pride. That's what's going to take you down here, Beowulf, Unferth implies. But then Beowulf has his turn to speak back to Unferth. Well, friend Unferth, you've had your say about Breca and me, but it was mostly beer that was doing the talking. The truth is this, when the going was heavy in those high waves, I was the strongest swimmer of all. We'd been children together and we grew up daring ourselves to outdo each other, boasting and urging each other to risk our lives on the sea. And so it turned out. Each of us swam holding a sword, a naked, hard-proofed blade for protection against the whale beasts. but Brecca could never move farther or faster than I could manage to move from him. Shoulder to shoulder, we struggled on for 5 nights, until the long flow and pitch of the waves, the perishing cold, night falling and winds from the north drove us apart. The deep boiled up by its wallowing, sent the sea brutes wild. My armor helped me to hold out, the hard-ringed chainmail, hand-forged and linked, a fine, close-fitting filigree of gold, kept me safe when some ocean creature pulled me to the bottom. Pinioned fast and swathed in its grip, I was granted one final chance. My sword plunged, and the ordeal was over. Through my own hands, the fury of battle had finished off the sea beast. Time and again, foul things attacked me, lurking and stalking, but I lashed out, gave as good as I got with my sword. My flesh was not for feasting on. There would be no monsters gnawing and gloating over their banquet at the bottom of the sea. Instead, in the morning, mangled and sleeping the sleep of the sword, they slopped and floated like ocean's leavings. From now on, sailors would be safe. The deep-sea raids were over for good. Light came from the east, bright guarantee of God, and the waves went quiet. I could see the headlands and buffeted cliffs. Often, for undaunted courage, fate spares the man it was not already marked. However, it occurred, my sword had killed the 9 sea monsters. Such night dangers and hard ordeals I have never heard of, nor of any man more desolate in surging waves. But worn out as I was, I survived, and came through with my life. The ocean lifted and laid me ashore. I landed safe on the coast of Finland. So the first half of Beowulf's speech is an answer to Unferth's story about his swimming match with Brecca. There's a lot of details that Unferth left out here. First of all, the fact that Brecca swam on while Beowulf was attacked by monsters, and ultimately he had to fight 9 monsters. As he's being pinned and held by this monster, he has to somehow take enough force to actually stab it through with no real room for his arm to move, while being pinned underwater. That sounds super hard. And so who's the one who really deserves glory here? Not only did I swim this insane swim, but I also fought off all these monsters, killed all of them, and cleared the way for sailors to safely pass over that area from now on. No more monsters attacking ships. So who's tougher, Brecca, who ran off, or me? There's a fantastic line in here as well. Often, for undaunted courage, fate spares the man it is not already marked. There's weird. Notice also he says, I was granted one final chance. Both these times he recognizes that fate has given him opportunity. He definitely recognizes his own prowess, his own skill, his own bravery, but he acknowledges time and again that there's something else there. And in this case, fate rewards the courageous. Just as we saw in his original boast earlier, fate goes ever as fate must. Here, fate sometimes will tip its hat to the courageous and give them another chance. But he's not done with Unferth. Now it's time to turn the tables around. Now, I cannot recall any fight you entered, Unferth, that bears comparison. I don't boast much when I say that neither you nor Brecca were ever much celebrated for swordsmanship, or for facing danger on the field of battle. You killed your own kith and kin, and for all your cleverness and quick tongue, you will suffer damnation in the depths of hell. The fact is, Unferth, if you were truly as keen and courageous as you claim to be, Grendel would never have gotten away with such unchecked atrocity, attacks on your king, havoc in Herod, and horrors everywhere. But he knows he need never be in dread of your blade making a mizzle of his blood, nor of vengeance arriving ever from this quarter, from the victory shieldings, the shoulderers of the spear. He knows he can trample down you Danes to his heart's content, humiliate and murder without fear of reprisal. But he will find me different. I will show him how Geat shapes to kill in the heat of battle. Then whoever wants to may grow great bravely to mead when morning light, scarfed in sun dazzle, shines forth from the south and brings another daybreak to the world. He turns the tides around and says, Unferth, you're good at calling out my bravery and my failures, but what about yours? You've never stood up to Grendel. You're no good with a sword. You probably don't even know which end is up. Not to mention the fact that you're a kin killer. And that's a really weird comment, because if Unferth is someone who has killed someone in his own family, that definitely is one of the greatest disgraces that anyone can have. If Egviah was banished for starting a blood feud, then imagine if you'd killed someone in your own family. The idea of fratricide, of killing your brother or killing your family member, is one of the most running atrocities in the background of this story. Remember where Grendel comes from. He's a descendant of Cain, the original brother killer. And we don't get this story. We don't hear what happened, whether it was an accident or whether Unferth has somehow paid or been forgiven for this. But Beowulf points out that there are eternal consequences to killing your family, and it certainly marks you as disgraced. Unferth is jealous of Beowulf at the beginning of this speech, but Beowulf puts him in his place. And Beowulf reaffirms, I'm going to take out this monster. It's going to happen. And after this bragging match is over, then Hrothgar recognizes a lot more in Beowulf than he seemed to acknowledge at first. This guy is something. Then the gray-haired treasure giver was glad. Far famed in battle, the prince of the Bright Danes and keeper of his people counted on Beowulf, on the warrior's steadfastness and his word. So he acknowledges that this guy's going to do it. This guy might be able to keep this promise. And in comes our final new character that we want to look at, and that is Wealhtheow. Wealhtheow is the queen, the wife of Hrothgar. Wealhtheow came in, Hrothgar's queen, observing the courtesies. Adorned in her gold, she graciously saluted the men in hall, then handed the cup first to Hrothgar, their homeland's guardian, urging him to drink deep and enjoy it, because he was dear to them. And he drank it down like the warlord he was with festive cheer. So this helming woman went on her rounds, queenly and dignified, decked out in rings, offering the goblet to all ranks, treating the household and the assembled troops until it was Beowulf's turn to take it from her hand. With measured words she welcomed the Geat and thanked God for granting her wish that a deliverer she could believe in would arrive to ease their afflictions. He accepted the cup, a daunting man, dangerous in action and eager for it always. And so she is the epitome of a queen of Anglo-Saxon culture. Here she is, treating everyone with courtesy. She is the perfect hostess. She's honoring her own husband, the king over all of this group, and she also honors the guest Beowulf and acknowledges his worth in this moment. In Chickering's notes, he talks about how Wealhtheow exhibits the qualities of the queen from the book Maxims 1 in the Exeter book. It says, "A woman shall prosper, beloved among her people, shall be cheerful, keep counsel, shall be generous with horses and treasure. At the mead taking she shall always, everywhere, first greet the lord of nobles before the troop of retainers, place the first cup promptly in her lord's hand, and she shall know good counsel and housekeeping for their mutual benefit." So therefore, Wealhtheow fits the ideal woman in every possible way. There's not a whole lot about her yet. She's going to come back and be very important very soon. And she gives Beowulf a chance to return the courtesy with another affirmation. "I had fixed purpose when I put out to sea. As I sat in the boat with my band of men, I meant to perform to the uttermost what your people wanted or perish in the attempt in the fiend's clutches. And I shall fulfill that purpose, prove myself with a proud deed, or meet my death here in the mead hall." One more chance for that boast, his promise again, and this time to the queen. The boast pleases Wealhtheow, and she goes to sit with Hrothgar at the front of the table. And so they get their celebration, celebrating the arrival of Beowulf, and as it closes, Hrothgar puts the charge of the hall in Beowulf's hands. And he says, "This is special. I've never given charge to a stranger like this before, but I'm giving you charge of the hall. Ward and guard it, for it is the greatest of houses. Be on your mettle now. Keep in mind your fame. Beware of the enemy. There's nothing you wish for that won't be yours if you win through alive." And so everyone goes to bed. As they settle in, the book says, "The King of Glory, as people learned, had posted a lookout who was a match for Grendel, a guard against monsters, special protection to the Danish prince. And the Geat placed complete trust in his strength of limb and the Lord's favor." So Beowulf has been put in this place by Providence, and he trusts in his own strength, but also in Providence at the same time. And because of that, he's going to make good on that special part of his boast. At this point, he takes off all of his armor, and he says, I'm leaving it all behind. I am fighting him just man to man, man to monster. And before he bedded down, Beowulf, that prince of goodness, proudly asserted, "When it comes to fighting, I count myself as dangerous any day as Grendel. So it won't be a cutting edge I'll wield to mow him down easily as I might. He has no idea of the arts of war, of shield or swordplay, although he does possess a wild strength. No weapons, therefore, for either this night. Unarmed he shall face me, if face me he dares. And may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he sees fit." So again, because Grendel's fighting unarmed, I'm gonna fight unarmed too. Then down the brave man lay with his bolster under his head, and his whole company of sea rovers at rest beside him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again, or get back to his native place and the people who reared him. So Beowulf's friends have been awfully brave and ready to go with the challenge, but now we get a recognition that they don't expect to get home again. They knew too well the way it was before, how often the Danes had fallen prey to death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the Weathergeats. Through the strength of one, they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth was clear: Almighty God rules over mankind, and always has. That Christian overtone ringing through all of this. No matter how scared the Geats might be, there's going to be ultimately a victory. And notice it's a victory of one. Although the one is obviously Beowulf. Beowulf is the one who's going to beat the monster and therefore win all of them glory and fame, just vicariously through him. It sounds like echoes of Christianity, of the one dying for all, the one who bears the weight for all. There's certainly potential Christian overtones for it. And so we come to evening. Next time, we will see what happens when Grendel enters the hall. Until then, thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or to watch another video, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Rap battle. Unferth versus Beowulf.
Yo, Big B, you think such big news with your boar's head helm and your shiny shoes? Well, you talk big, but I got news that'll wreck ya, cause I know the story of you and Brekka. Yeah, you may boast, but it's gonna be sick when Grendel uses you as a toothpick. Weird to your mother. I'm here to serve and protect. You sit around and neglect. And look, Herod is wrecked, cause Grendel's breathing down your neck. So yeah, I went for that tip, cause Brekka gave me some lip. The storms keep pouring down. See monsters all around. This hero ain't gonna drown. I'm just beginning. I'm spitting kiddings. I'm always winning. I'll knock Grendel's head spinning. With my bare hands, cause I'm a man. Not like you, brother killing Firebrand. You're down there on the floor. By Lord, why don't you take a stand? I'm passing out rings and torques. I'm slicing monsters and orcs. I'm slaying spooks and trolls. While you paint Wealthyell's toes. Mic drop.